Okay, hopefully I didn't wait too long to do this, but kind of ran out of daylight here, but hopefully we can see this out here and I don't have to go back in the shop. Just a real quick thing for the guys that was asking me about the knife angles. I will redo this later in a better quality, but for now, guess we're going to have to put up with the traffic because apparently they opened the floodgates on the highway. Neighbor kids are playing soccer, so anyhow, just a real quick one-off here. And again, you're going to have to deal with my awful artwork. But the thing that we were talking about was the heavy angles or steep angle versus a flat angle on the knife blades. Basically, most of your older pocket knives had a 17-degree working angle. That's fine and dandy for the old timers that would sit there and just whittle cedar into a 5-gallon bucket in the old general store. The reason we put a heavier, steeper angle on the blades is because any type of utility work, i.e. these are our skinning knives, we'll put a heavier angle on it. Generally, they always say the heavier the angle or the steeper the angle, the less sharp the blade. That's true and not true. It's harder to get a sharpened edge or a razor edge on a steeper angle because you have less variances that you can go to keep that edge nice and straight. However, if you do it right, you can get a heavy steep angle to shave. Now, first off, when we're talking about the angles, and again, I'm having to stand behind the camera and reach around the tripod, so when you measure your angle, when they say a 17-degree angle, a 22-degree angle, a 27-degree angle, the angle is for one side. Basically, again, pardon my crappy drawing, this is where you measure your angle from the center line of the blade to this side. So it's half of your blade. So 17 degrees overall, this angle would be 34 degrees. But the angle is measured from here. The reason that they say a steeper angle is harder to sharpen or not as sharp sorry, I'm having to chug Kool-Aid here while I'm trying to talk because I'm hot and dry. It's 7 o'clock at night and it's still 93 degrees out here. Just your tip here is going to be your angle. I'll get into the secondary cuts here in just a minute. But on a flat edge, most people will basically on a stone, they'll lay the blade down kind of flat. And I'm sure you've seen the old timers, they'll lay the blade down kind of flat and just do that all the way down. What happens is you get a thin edge, but when you go to cut, that edge tends to roll. You can get a nice wire edge on that will shave like a straight razor. Another reason that we don't use straight razors for skinning, they're nice and sharp, but the edges won't hold up. Anytime you're filing a low angle, if you go just a little bit this way or just a little bit that way, laying the blade on the stone, as you can see, you're still going to have a thin angle edge. To get something like this to shave, if you go just that way just a little bit, what you end up doing is you end up rolling this edge over. I guess I might as well go ahead and do the secondary here. Again, apologies for my artwork. Your secondary angle is going to be your actual edge, which will be something like that. And then you'll have your knife angle. That's your secondary bevel in this area. So when your blade comes down, you have your first grind. This will be your angle. This secondary angle here is going to be the very edge, which I don't think we can see it in this camera lighting, but as you can see from right here, that part that the stone hits is your secondary angle. So if you have a pretty thin blade, if you get that stone off just a little bit, you're still filing the very tip, the very edge itself. It's a more forgiving edge to get a sharp edge on. Again, when we're trying to do it here, that's the blade actually the initial angle, touching the stone. If you get just a little bit off here, you're still going to be grinding on your blade, but you're not touching the cutting edge. All you're doing is just filing down this area. If you go just a little bit too far that way, then you're rolling that edge over. And instead of having just a nice little point, a lot of people tend to do this, is you tend to roll it. Now again, if you can keep the exact same stroke in the exact same angle, you can put a shaving edge on a steep blade and it will last and it will hold up. Again, my apologies for the crappy artwork and the bad lighting, but as you can see, that's not touching the edge, that's rolling over the edge. On the low angle, you're still going to be getting close to the edge, the cutting edge, and you're still going to be filing that edge down to a thinner profile. Just to show what this angle is, and generally I would be using a flat stone to do this, but I don't put a flat stone on this knife because of the recurve, and I also don't put any kind of cutting. This is an old case moonstick. Now, most of y'all are familiar with the ceramic stones now. When I was a kid, we didn't have ceramic. This moonstick was the first ceramic rod they ever came out with, and this was a case XX thing. And it's made for very, very, very fine polishing edge, which I'll get into that in a minute. I always put a polishing edge on mine. But to show you the angle that my knife is at, if I can do this in the camera, this would be laid down flat. For me to cut this edge, I have to stand that blade all the way up to there, which I don't think I got enough room to get in the camera frame, but that would be flat. That is where I cut my edges. Now most people would say, trying to get where I can get my fingers out of the way and get you a better picture of the angle, but a lot of people say there's no way you can put a shaving edge on a knife at that steep of an angle. You can if you keep the exact same stroke every single time. If you lower it down a little, you're going to screw it up. If you raise it up too much, you're going to dull everything that you already did. So before I run out of daylight here, I'll show you a cheat trick. I don't do this myself because I do it by feel, but for you newbies, take you a marker. This is a dry erase. Sharpie works, but you will take you a marker. Again, I'm trying to go between the camera and in the camera and off the camera, but simply and follow just that secondary edge. In other words, the parts you're going to cut. Again, my marker's not showing up very good, but y'all can get the idea. Again, I will do this at a later date and give you some better camera. But now, with that blacked edge there, that covers from the cutting edge to the bevel, secondary bevel. So that way, when you put your knife on, and this works for a flat stone just as well as this, and as you work that stone, you can see exactly what part of the metal and what part of the edge your stone's in contact with. So if you're running up here and taking all this off, well, you got your knife blade down too flat and you're not touching the actual edge. All you're doing is just filing off up here. If you're taking off just the very, very edge of it and leaving your secondary bevel, then you got it stood up too far. So all this is just a reference to when you run your knife strokes down, that it will show you where the stone is touching on the blade. And I think some of the newer guys and everything have started using like the temp blue, or basically that coatings that you can put on it. Does the same thing. But this is something I came up with when I was younger, just to give myself a reference. So that goes back to the serrated edge versus the polished edge. And when I say serrated edge, I never put a steel to any of my knives. A steel does one of two things. The smooth steel, kitchen knives, butcher knives, that kind of stuff, they have a very thin blade angle. Well, that edge tends to roll. The steel, simply, it doesn't sharpen the knife, it simply takes the roll off the edge. A lot of your newer steels, if you'll notice, they have grooves or lines down them. When you steel your knife with those, it actually burrs up the edge. It's many micro serrations. The serrations, you got, if you look under the microscope, you got those 10,000 little needle points sticking out that act like a serrated edge. That's fine and dandy, if you're going to be doing quick meat slicing and you don't know how to put a polished edge on, it's going to go through smooth. With the polished edge, instead of grabbing, it will sorry, I had to catch up there. It will just glide through like butter. Now back to the very highly polished edge versus just a regular honed edge. As I said, I only run my moonstick on this for touch-ups. And if I had to guesstimate a grit on it compared to a stone, this is probably a 6,000 grit. It doesn't take much metal off, but it will polish the edge and it will do some sharpening. As I said, this one was bought in 1977. This was this was Daddy's. Grandpa's is the one that got broke. So Grandpa had one and Daddy had one, and this is the one I had from Daddy, and Grandpa's got dropped, shattered, and had pieces about like that, and another little piece. Well, I carried that piece in my pocket, so I always had me a moonstick with me. Again, that's before the advent of all the modern stuff. Now you can go to Wally World and buy whatever you want to. Diamond stones, that's fine and dandy. Problem with most of your diamond stones, especially if you get them little pocket stick stones, they're real heavy grit. They're real coarse grit. They'll put an edge on that will shave an arm, but that's where you're going to get like kind of razor burn. Those teeny tiny micro serrations all down there from that heavy grit little sticky out needle points are going to catch. If you try to go just smooth down, they'll catch. The polished edge will cut clean and it will cut smooth. One thing you have to watch out for in a polished edge knife versus the serrated type edges is you've seen a lot of people rake their finger across like that, or they'll do this right here. Oh, that's a good sharp, yeah, that's a sharp blade. I've seen people with the polished edge blades, especially mine, that they'll try to do that. Oh, that thing's dull, and they'll look and they'll have about 3 slices in their thumb because they were cut and they didn't know it. Because it doesn't grab and you can't really feel the tackiness, I guess you'd say, but the grabbiness of it. They actually, it'll, well, give you a story on this one before I run out of total daylight here. I'll sharpen that on the old moonstick. This is one a friend of mine gave me. First time I sharpened it, I put it on a moonstick. I worked for about 2 hours probably putting the edge on her. Need to clean her up a little, but 30-year-old deer blood. But one of buddy's kids was riding with me on a work job one day, and I carried this in the console of my van, and he started to do the down the arm thing, which you can't see in this light, but make a long story short, he's like, "That's not a very sharp knife, is it?" I said, "Bubby, you need to reach in the back and get the roll of paper towels." He's like, "Why?" I said, "You're getting blood on my seats." He had literally filleted the entire top layer of skin off of his arm from here to here. Just filleted it off. Two days later, he come in with an arm bandaged up and threw 3 pocket knives on the counter and says, "Here, sharpen my knives for me." So again, I will do this in better quality later, but just give you guys a quick thing to answer a couple of quick questions on, you know, why do you use these edges? That's because, as I said on this knife, in the last video, I had gutted, skinned, and dressed 5 deer with it, and it was still shave. It takes some work, it takes some doing, and it takes some practice, and it takes some, well, it takes a lot of patience, but it can be done. But again, as I said, just to give you a quick little reference here, as long as you keep the exact same stroke, every single stroke, the exact same up, the exact same down, then you're okay. But if you ever get that off just a hair, you've screwed it up. Where a low angle is a lot more forgiving, you can still put a shaving edge on here, but it's not going to hold up as long. So I am out of daylight because once that sun went down, it goes quick. So I'll go ahead and throw this up for you guys real quick. Maybe that'll answer a couple questions. Hit me up in the comments down at the bottom. If you got any more questions, as I said, I will be doing this in depth when I get back in the shop and get everything lit up better. But this will just give you an idea, and that way it'll probably bring out your questions, and then when we go to do the next one, that'll let me answer whatever questions you have. Thanks a lot, and I'll try to do this in a little bit.